Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time it's pretty much a short comic book and even games collectors tips videos. So when you're going out there, you're looking to get a comic book or something like a game or whatever, there's just a couple of tips that you should just keep in mind if you already don't have them in mind when you go out to purchase from dealers and so forth. The first thing that I think that we all as collectors or whatever it is that we consider ourselves, if we collect, if we're looking to flip, if we're looking to invest, whatever it is, when we go out to buy a book, let's say from a dealer, we go to a show, we go to a con, and we see one of those wall books that we want to get for whatever reason, I want to see if I can flip that, or if I want to see if I can add that to my collection. This speaks to every type of collector or purchaser of comic books out there. You see that wall book that you really want, you get it, and you see the price, and then, you try to talk the dealer down sometimes. But before that, now, maybe some of you already do this. Sometimes this has happened to me where you get so wrapped up in the moment, so wrapped up in saying, oh, wow, they got the book I want. Oh, wow, it's the price I want. Or, oh, wow, the person's going to sell it to me for what I want. Before you get so dedicated to the purchase, okay, before you dedicate yourself to spending that money, handing over that money for that book, a couple of things you probably should do that I think are for the best, that I think some of us do forget about. Number one, make sure the book is complete. Now, like I said, maybe some of you already do this, and if some of you already do this, you're on the right track. But I think it's very important to make sure that the book is complete. Count the pages. I've found that my comic book shop is an excellent resource to finding out how many pages a book should be. Well, how many pages are there? You just don't count the pages that are numbered on the bottom. Well, this is page 1, page 2, and then it may skip a page because it's an advertisement or whatever, then go to page 3. You have to do something else. You have to count every one individually, even the cover. Now, for me, I like to get older books, some Silver Age, and from my understanding, from what I've researched, most Silver Age, if not all Silver Age, except for those bigger size books that Marvel put out in the late 60s, or king size annuals, or giant size, or whatever they are, most of them are 36 pages. Make sure you count the pages. Flip through it, ask the dealer if you see that wall book that you want, or whatever book that you want. It doesn't matter if it's a wall book or not. Make sure you have some info on the book. Make sure you find out exactly how many pages it's supposed to be, and make sure you take time out to count them. Any dealer, in my opinion, that would not allow you to count the pages, I would move on. If this person says, no, sorry, you can't count the pages, screw you. Time to move on. And you have to be willing to make that call, to say to yourself, hey, if I'm unable to count these pages, for whatever reason, the dealer won't let me, or I just don't have the nerve to ask. Sometimes we don't want to ask, for whatever reason. You should be able to walk away and be okay with walking away and saying, yes, I really want that book, but I don't want it that bad. Because you can wind up paying for an incomplete book, as I have. I speak from experience. I've done that many times. I've paid for a book. I'm like super happy, and I get home and I'm looking at it, and a page is torn out, or I've noticed that the centerfold is missing, right? And I just paid what I think was full price for something that's not even freaking complete, and it didn't even say on the book, on the wall, or whatever, book incomplete. So you really should know what you're spending your money on to make sure that you're not wasting money. Okay? So that's definitely something that I would do if you're not already doing it. The second reason why I would look at the book, other than just making sure that the centerfold's there, all the pages are there, and so forth, I would look for restoration. Sometimes it's hard to see restoration. I think you would have to have a keen eye. I don't necessarily have a keen eye, and I certainly don't bring a black light with me to certain books and make sure that, this part of the book is glowing, so restoration. I'm not saying to that level, but just simple things that you can look for, that you can see uh, when it comes to restoration. And I think the simplest thing to see, personally, is some color touches, especially on dark colored covers. Okay. Now, other people in the community have talked about this topic. I think Curtis Cameron talked about it. He talked about it very well and showed an example more than what I'm doing, right? But I repeat it because it's important. If you're the type of person that is no way, restoration is not in my collection, then you need to start doing this if you're not doing it already. Especially with these older books that have darker covers, in particular black covers. Make sure when you open up the book and you look at the cover, look at the inside of the cover and see if there are any little blots, like ink blots, that bled through the cover. If it has a color touch, usually from non-archival materials, you will see a bleed. And they're usually at the corners because a lot of times the corners get creased. You have those black or darker covers that when they get creased, you can see the color breaking crease, right? Well, someone takes a marker and colors it in, and maybe you can't see it right away, but you might be able to see the bleed. When it comes to archival materials, it might be a little more difficult. But just make sure especially when you're buying darker colored covers, pay close attention to the color, even if someone used Resto with a regular marker or an archival marker. Just take close attention to see if the color is matching all around. It's still a risk, but it's definitely one you should really be keen to. You should definitely learn how to do and get used to doing. For me, this is mainly for other colors, and it's obviously not when it comes to black or anything like that, but I'm colorblind. And sometimes with other covers that might have a yellow or an orange or a red in it, and someone does a color touch on it with something that does not bleed through, but to someone who's not colorblind, you can almost see that the colors are a little different. I have difficulty with that, so every time I buy a book, it's at risk. And I'm willing to bet a lot of us that have collected a lot of older books, we might have a restored book that we are unaware of. Unless you've been checking for these sort of things for years and you could spot it all the time, then okay, maybe you don't have one. But I'm willing to bet some of us who have larger collections that have been collecting for a long period of time that have not always checked for books, I would not be surprised if we have maybe one or two restored books that we just don't know about. So that's what I want to say about comics. I know these are simple things to follow. Like I said, this is probably nothing new to some of us. Some of us always count pages, right? Good, keep it up. But this is just for some people that are like, oh wow, I sometimes get wound up in getting the book without checking for the pages and Resto. Maybe I should start doing this, especially when you're buying higher priced books, right? I was talking to a guy on Facebook, and I'm part of some of the groups. I'm a part of the EC Fan Club, EC Fan Addict Facebook page, and I was talking to him about some EC books, and he said he would never spend more than $200 on a book unless it's CGC'd. Not because, I just have to collect slabs. Because with the CGC, he feels that if it's restored, they will pick up on it. And he doesn't feel like spending top dollar for something that may actually be restored. So in a sense, it makes some sense what he said. And this guy's got every EC book that I could ever want. On my birthday, he showed me pictures of his Crime Patrol 15, his War Against Crime 10. I was like, oh. But he makes a lot of sense. So I just want to briefly talk about when you're buying, for those of us that are out there collecting video games. Not disc-based games as much, obviously. But when you're buying those old Nintendo games, and Super Nintendo games in particular, or Genesis games, the cartridge games, much like with comics, hey, can I count the pages? You should be able to open up the cart. Make sure you have the correct screwdrivers. The Super Nintendo and Genesis have different screwdrivers to open up carts. Make sure you have the correct one. You could look it up online. I don't know them off the top of my head. the measurements and so forth. But you have to make sure that you open up the cart to take a look at the board. And there are a lot of tutorial YouTube channels that talk about spotting a reproduction game. Okay, if you're spending some of these games that go for hundreds of dollars, you have to be able to open it up and see for yourself if this is a repro or not. Take a look at the labels. Sometimes labels are reproductions because the old label was so messed up they replaced it. There are things you can look for when it comes to the logo. The artwork that you could see sometimes is a bit off. That's not perfect. And that's the way you can tell if a label is a reproduction, especially with the Nintendo logo or even the Sega logo. I must say, though, the repros are getting better and better. But when you open up the cart and you look at the board, look for the logos inside the board where it says Nintendo and the year. Look at the chips. Make sure that you become familiar with these things. Look them up online. If you want to go buy Wild Guns for Super Nintendo, it's a $200-300 game. Make sure you scout pictures ahead of time. There are plenty of them online to make sure that you get a picture of that board, and make sure the dealer allows you to open up that game to make sure it's 100% legit, because you do not want to be overspending for a fake. Okay? So those are the things that you should be doing when it comes to video game collecting for Super Nintendo, Nintendo, Genesis. As for discs, I don't know too much about spotting reproductions for those. Once again, probably have to take a closer look at the artwork, and there are better channels to listen to about those sort of things. I'll talk more about games and other tips in another collecting tips video, maybe to come out another month or two. I'll talk to you more about those things. But these were the things I wanted to talk about when it came to collecting comics and getting some games. Make sure you get what you're paying for. Make sure you're getting what you think you're paying for. If you're looking to get a legit game, make sure it's legit. If you're looking to get a blue label comic book, make sure it's blue label. Make sure it's complete. Make sure it's exactly what you're comfortable with paying for. Make sure it's exactly what you're paying for, what you believe you're paying for, and not an incomplete book. The last thing I wanted to briefly talk about, part of the discussion thing. Now, this is it's a little bit about restoration and some of the things that I've been seeing online and discussions I've had with people. I know CGC and the other companies do not consider tape restoration. I know some of us collectors, we tend to think it is restoration, but CGC does not acknowledge, as far as I understand, a book that has a considerable amount of tape on it, restoration. It just will say tape on cover, tape on the inside, blah, 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 blah. Okay. From what I heard, the reason why they don't consider tape restoration is because it's been grandfathered in. Kids and adults that used to collect comic books in the 40s, 50s, and 60s would often put tape on their covers to make sure that the cover doesn't fall off, that the tears don't get any bigger, so forth and so on. So it's sort of been grandfathered in. Okay. My problem with this is consistency. So people say, well, what do you mean? Well, they say people have been doing this, collectors have been doing this for decades. That's why it's been grandfathered in, right? That's why tape is not considered restoration, or at least by CGC. Some collectors may say, hey, I would never buy a book with tape. Well, this is not that type of video. That's a different discussion altogether. I'm talking about what is considered restoration, why tape is not considered restoration, and why other things are. So whether or not somebody would buy a book with tape is immaterial. So, with that being said, tape not considered restoration. So why is marker considered restoration? You mean to tell me that collectors have been putting tape on their comic books for years to preserve them for whatever way they want to preserve them, and that's been grandfathered in, but people haven't been using markers on comic books to hide defects for years too? My point is, if you're going to consider one thing restoration, you should really probably consider the other thing restoration too, because it makes no sense. You mean to tell me that kids or adults from the 50s and 60s that had a darker colored book, like what I was mentioning earlier on in this video, did not take a black marker or a brown marker or whatever to color in those creases, those color breaking creases, those defects to make the cover look better. People have been doing that for decades too, so why isn't that grandfathered in? Where is the line drawn? I mean, I understand when you put chemicals on it and so forth and so on to clean books. I mean, that can be considered more restorative more restorative way of preserving a book than other ways. But I just don't get it. Doesn't tape have some sort of adhesive on it? Well, that adhesive is not originally part of the book. It has been added to the book, so that's grandfathered in. But markers are not grandfathered in. To me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. When you see those restored books that say color touch, non-archival, so that means some everyday Joe maybe took a Sharpie or whatever and just colored it in, and that's restoration. It's just I don't know. I think it should be restoration across the board, but I'm not CGC, so I just wanted to throw that out there as a little thing I was thinking about, and just curious what you think about this topic, markers and tape and all that stuff. Once again, this is not a debate on whether or not you would buy a book that's restored. It's just, when it comes to restoration, what do you think about that? Is there a reason why markers are definitely considered restoration instead of tape? Because I think people have been putting color touches on their books as long as they've been putting tape on them. So why is one grandfathered in and one isn't? Don't know. I just don't know. Anyway, thank you all for watching. This was just another short little video I wanted to make, and thank you all for watching. For those of you that took the time out to watch my video game history part 1 video, I enjoyed making it. I really did. My first attempt at making that video, I was just like, this is boring. The second attempt, I was more into it, and I enjoyed it, and I cut the time down a bit. So I'm really looking forward to covering the console wars and Sega Genesis and all that stuff. And yes, I know I've been saying it every video, I am going to be doing my giveaways. Like I said, the books I plan to give away are nothing big. It's just a little thank you for all of you that helped me get to 1,000 subscribers, that have been supportive of me, especially those of you that are constantly commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. I really do. If I don't thank you, with each video, I'm thanking you now. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And probably going to make another video tomorrow. See if I could bring James back into the video, and we could see how much he's grown over the last almost 2 years he's been appearing in these videos. But thank you once again for watching. I like to make more videos like this, collecting tips, what to look for, and little discussions at the end about different topics in comic books, whether it's restoration or CGC or stuff like that. All right. Thank you for watching. I hope all of you are well. Christmas is a few days away, so if I don't get a chance to talk to you, have a Merry Christmas. But I'm going to make another video tomorrow and wish everyone Merry Christmas again. Take care, everyone. Good night.